Alright, guys, back to this, and this might be the last on the anti Semitic history theme that I'm doing here, which is the broader segue. Anyways, the history of anti Semitic conspiracy theories from the Rothschilds to George Soros. Alright, so this article is basically covering this dude's book in an interview. In Jewish Space Lasers, the Rothschilds, and 200 Years of Conspiracy Theories, uh, out September 19th, author Michael Rothschild, no relation to banker he writes about, tracks this one wealthy family, tracks how this wealthy family became the subject of a myriad of far-right conspiracies. While the family still makes real headlines, the first North American auction of items and art from the Rothschild family collection on October 11th is expected to bring in about 50 million. There are countless false stories about them that the journalist debunks in his book. The author Rothschild, in his expert on conspiracy theories, and his last book about the origins of QAnon. The Time talked to Rothschild on August 28th about where the conspiracy theories about the Rothschild finances fit in the larger history of anti-Semitism. The following conversation has been lightly edited and condensed. The Rothschild were one of the number of wealthy German Jewish families in the Frankfurt, and they simply went out into the banking capital of Europe at the right time. They made an enormous amount of money off of the Napoleonic Wars and invested that into railroads, mining, real estate, media. Descendants of the family still exist. What do they do now? There are many, many descendants of the Rothschild family. Some are involved in banking, some have nothing to do with banking. There's one who is an environmentalist and adventurer currently dating Angelina Jolie. There's another one who was mixed up with Paul Ranamore and Oleg Deripaska. Hold on, exiting out of this video that's about to play, seemingly. Alright. One thing that they really have in common, though, is that they have a real aversion to the media. Occasionally, one will be interviewed about banking or art or wine or some new philanthropic adventure they're interested in, but they are very, very publicly shy, publicity shy, which is a big change from many of other wealthy families we've seen dominating the landscape over the last few decades. That's true, I suppose. Like, I see no reason why anyone needs to really hide it when we got Jeff Bezos and people openly, like, dragging piles of dirt just to make a landscape somewhere else. Jeez. Okay, how did the Rothschilds family become a target of conspiracy theorists? Was there a turning point? This pamphlet came out in Paris in 1846, written by an anonymous pamphleteer who went by Satan. One is that Nathan Rothschild, the best known son of the original patriarch Mayer Rothschild, had known the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo in advance. Now this pamphlet came out 30 years after the battle, and Nathan had been dead for 10 years at this point. The other accusation in this pamphlet is that Nathan's brother James, who is based in Paris, had owned a railroad and neglected the maintenance on it. And there was an accident on it, and a bunch of people who were killed. So you have this idea that the Rothschilds are greedy, they are manipulators, but they're also cheap, and they don't care about the lives of ordinary men. So, of course, this is only a conspiracy theory about the Jews, right? I mean, I can see it making sense that rich people don't really have to care because broadly they have the money just to sweep it under the table or somehow have cushioning from the criticism, So this definitely, it would be impossible for this just to be a Jewish issue. Anyways, this pamphlet was a massive hit in Paris. It sold tens of thousands of copies. After that, there is a massive industry of Rothschild conspiracy theories, some of which are just invented on the spot. The others criticized tropes like Jews being cheap, Jews being greedy, Jews being clannish, keeping their money to themselves. This was really the first instance of specifically anti-Semitic, anti-Rothschild conspiracy theory becoming a major driver of commerce that essentially went viral to our current parlance. Throughout a lot of the 20th century, the Rothschilds were seen in anti-Semitic propaganda as the kings of Jews, the string pullers of the string pullers. Your book talks about the roots of anti-Semitism and how Jews became associated with being good with money because of how they grew up learning arithmetic very young. How did they get twisted by conspiracy theorists? Oh, okay. There were a number of prohibitions in the Middle Ages in Europe on what Jews were allowed to do and what Christians were allowed to do as far as money. It was considered a mortal sin by Christians to lend money at too high an interest rate. It was considered usury. It was on par with murder, incest as just the worst thing you could do. At the same time, these growing Christian communities needed money to build their churches, to build their castles, to equip their armies, so they had to go somewhere to get it. They ended up going with Jewish communities where they had access to wealth. They were able to lend money at interest. So you had this dichotomy of we have to go to these people for money, but we also loathe them because they have the money to lend us. Jews get this reputation as being good with money, as being able to sort of conjure money out of thin air, but also very suspicious because they were good with money. It's very contradictory. So Christians basically, if you go by inventing the enemy, they invented their own scapegoat by which they weren't allowed to use money. But since they're not, the enemy can use the money because they're not pure like you, and so they are allowed to be selfish, and so you use them for this thing, which now you've created a sort of ideology about them over generations of time after Christians have sort of made this the rule of law that Jews are supposed to be like this. Alright. Did you find any key difference between anti-Semitism at the Rothschilds in the US compared to in Europe? I was really surprised to learn that there was never a Rothschild branch of the family in the US, but the volume of conspiracy theories about the family is enormous and really started with the initial diaspora of Europeans to the US. A lot of these people really did extol the Rothschilds as paragons of virtue and the example to which all Jews should look up to. And a lot of Christian papers of the time found it just baffling and found the Rothschilds figures of fascination. And of course, that very quickly curdles into anti-Semitism. In Europe, the Rothschilds are very visible. They've got their places everywhere. They're built railroads, their names are on hospitals, but in America, they are objects of curiosity, and curiosity can uh, easily turn into suspicion. It's like if you don't see physical evidence of these people, then people's imagination run wild. That's exactly it. Yes, basically, like, if it's not even about the Jews, then it's just like, oh, it must be about the Jews. Okay, let's talk about the title of your book, Jewish Space Lasers. What's that conspiracy? Where does that conspiracy fit in the history of conspiracy theories? That specific phrase, Jewish space lasers, is one that is supportedly uttered by Marjorie Taylor Greene in her 2018 Facebook post, accusing the Rothschilds of using a space-based solar generator to start the California wildfire that turned out to be one of the worst in the state's history. This post, which I think has been deleted pretty quickly after it went up, was found again in 2021, just after she took office, and it started this whole round of memes and jokes about how Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks the Rothschilds own a space laser and use it to control the weather. Now, one of the interesting things that I found is that in that Facebook post, she never uses that term. She never says Jewish space laser. She never even says Jewish. She talks about the Rothschilds and how it's interesting that the board members of the Pacific Gas and Electric were found negligent for the fire, was also a senior executive at Rothschild Inc. But her conspiracy theory is so cockamamie and so unfollowable that you don't even really understand that what role the Rothschilds are supposed to play in all this. It's really an example of not even so much an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but how conspiracy theories are so needlessly complicated and serve as much more histrionic explanations to obscure what's really going on, which, of course, in this case is something like climate change, making every forest fire much worse. Yeah, they won't take credit, but they'll just blame a boogeyman. Yeah, these people in power are fucking jokes. Actually, you know, I've been lurking a lot before I started making these videos. I haven't really heard much of Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's good. Alright. How would you describe the state of anti-Semitism in the United States? There is a major upswing in major anti-Semitism, certainly in anti-Semitic acts of violence, acts of vandalism, flyers being distributed around the neighborhoods by these very interested, savvy young racists who are getting attention for themselves. Some of these big social media influencers talk about constantly about Jewish influence, Jewish power, the Jewish ability to get away with things nobody can get away with. We're really dropping the veneer that there's any kind of separation between the Rothschild and just the rank and file Reform Jew who goes to synagogue once a year. Where does Donald Trump era sit in the history of anti-Semitism in the United States? I don't think Trump made America more anti-Semitic. America has always been anti-Semitic. What Trump did was give up permission to say this stuff, give us permission to really expound on these cockamamie theories. Yes. And Arab American, Muslim American, pretty much Middle Eastern hatred across the board in terms of Trump's rhetoric. Um, oh crap, did I do that again? Okay, are these similarities or differences? Are there similarities or differences between the anti-Semitic myths about the Rothschilds and George Soros? The book finishes with how Soros has become the Rothschild of the 21st century. There's always going to be the need for someone to blame when things go wrong. Someone has gotten too powerful, too rich, and needs to be knocked down a peg. For a long time, the Rothschilds really filled that role. It was really about 2004 when George Soros got involved in American politics and helped fund the John Kerry campaign that this right-wing media machine that had spent generations attacking the Rothschild very quickly and very uh, fervorously pivoted to George Soros. Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly did hour-long specials on him as a puppet master. Alex Jones talks constantly about the Rothschilds, constantly about George Soros, was inspired by some of the most prolific anti-Semites of the 20th century. He talks all of the time about the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy was a huge influence on him when he was a teenager. That book is full of Rothschild conspiracy theories. What we're seeing now is this proposing of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for a new generation of people who are just discovering them, and it really runs through the Rothschilds. Nowadays, with the 2020-24 presidential election coming up, we're definitely seeing the idea that Soros is funding all of the Democrats, funding all of the district attorneys who are indicting Trump. It's all part of some plan to keep Trump out of office, and it's all Soros doing. Is there a takeaway you want people to come away with after reading our book? Anti-Semitism is very easy to couch in euphemisms, which you hear terms like globalist foreign bankers or London financiers that usually has some reference to the Jews. Unfortunately, these theories travel much faster than any kind of debunking will ever be able to stop. The truth is always going to travel slower than the lies, and we have an election coming up that is very susceptible to being influenced by this constant stream of conspiracy theories. All right. So, honestly, it's like Christians from the inception created the, and this is from Inventing the Enemy. they invented Jews as the icon of the antichrist, like as the image. And so now it's like there's the image of Jews with space lasers destroying forests, you know, causing mayhem everywhere. I think that's really messed up. There's not much I could say because I feel like I said what I needed to. They created their scapegoat that they know they did, and of course, people forget any history. It seems like it re- repeats itself to be more bigoted as people forget what's going on. You know, they didn't initially, they didn't, they probably didn't like what they created when they were giving Jews the power because, they just created their enemy just then, you know. So it must have been like, even though the money is no longer in Christian hands, so to speak, even though it is with mega churches like these, it is technically like a Christian scheme, and Jews are just sort of like